Week 3 is almost in the book, so today I'm bringing you 5 moves to make heading into Week 4 fantasy football, and we started off with some trade targets. Number 1 trade target for me heading into Week 4 fantasy football, it's going to be Drizzy Drake London for the Atlanta Falcons. And Drake London did not have a great Week 3. Honestly, he really hasn't had a great season. Only 10.5 fantasy points in full PPR with an 86% snap share, 8 targets for 5 receptions, 55 yards. Like we said, he hasn't scored a touchdown on the season. And when we look at this Atlanta Falcons team, we saw Michael Penix be the check down king, the check down god, not absolutely having any sort of fantasy football value, any sort of actually real life quarterback value. They actually ended up, it got so out of hand that they put Kirk Cousins in the fourth quarter. So when you're looking at the overall snap share in the snaps, I mean, Drake London, him and Darnell Mooney were the top 2 snaps, had the most routes run, only had 7 targets compared to Darnell Mooney's 10. I'm just a little bit worried about the passing volume in this offense, as well as the fact that can Michael Penix actually be the guy? I think we kind of got ahead of our skis, especially with Drake London and probably the projection when we saw the amazing last 3 game stretch of last year. And we were like, oh my gosh, Drake London in one game had 18 total targets. And you're like, man, if he can do that each and every game. But we haven't seen that target share through 3 games. 15 targets in that week 1 game, which gave us a lot of excitement. So I know it's there, but even in those 15 targets, he only had 13.5 fantasy points in full PPR. So I think the panic is definitely there for Drizzy Drake London. But right now, I don't think people are valuing him like that, second round pick that you had to take in your redraft league. And so if we take over and look over on the Fantasy Calc database, we're going to be able to see a few different deals that are currently going down for Drake London. Let's go. The settings on this are 10 or 12 league size, 0.5 or 1 PPR. So in a 1 quarterback, 12 team, 1 PPR, start 8, someone traded away Garrett Wilson to go get Drake London. As much as we've seen Garrett Wilson maybe have a little bit better of a floor, I think the upside is still there with Drizzy Drake London. Now, we can scroll down a little bit more. Next trade that I see is Kyren Williams and Keenan Allen for Drake London. Now, after kind of this last week, probably going to lean the Kyren Williams and Keenan Allen side, as Keenan Allen is looking like the clear one. So maybe the topic about Drake London is, hey, if I can get that sort of package for Drake London, then 100% do it. Let's look at another one. Someone traded away Nick Chubb for Drake London. Clearly, you're going to go Drake London. Kenneth Walker for Drake London. I think that's probably more of an appropriate level trade. And all these actually have happened on the 22nd, so they actually happened yesterday. But Drake London for Kenneth Walker is an interesting trade. So I think for me, if you're at a point where you feel pretty confident in your running backs, you have a really good probably quarterback or tight end, and you need a wide receiver that potentially has, high-end wide receiver 2, maybe even low-end wide receiver 1 points per game upside, I do want to be taking a shot on Drake London because I do think he can get back to being the Drake London that we've projected him to be and get back to what we saw last year, where in the last 3 games of the season, we saw him put up 10.9, 17.6, and 40 fantasy points in those 3 weeks. I think Drake London could definitely get there this season. Now, my second player you need to be trading for heading into Week 4 fantasy football, it is going to be Tetairoa McMillan for the Carolina Panthers. And when we're talking about good old T-Mac, was a little bit of a down week in Week 3 compared to the first 2 weeks, where he had 11 fantasy points in Week 1 versus Jacksonville, 16 fantasy points in Week 2, and then in Week 3 only had 7.8. Now, his targets did go down. In Week 1 and Week 2, he had 9 and 10, only had 8 for only 3 receptions for 48 yards. Now, was not the best day for good old Tetairoa, but as we got to look, he did have that long catch of 23 yards. Like I said, it was not a really great game script for him. It was a pretty run-heavy game for the Carolina Panthers overall. But if we look at the weeks ahead, we got the New England defense, we got Miami defense, and we got Dallas defense over the next 3 weeks. I think this is going to be some get-back-right games for Tetairoa McMillan for some good old T-Mac. So I want to be investing pretty hard because he is the wide receiver 30 currently right now as it stands fantasy points-wise. So as we kind of look at what are some different trades that we can do, we look over on the Fantasy Football Calculator database, and what we're going to see is somebody traded away Ladd McConkey straight up for Tetairoa McMillan. Now, I love me some Ladd McConkey. I think if you base it off of what we saw last year, amazing. But right now, Ladd McConkey is like the wide receiver 3 on his team. We're seeing Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnston both outproduce Ladd McConkey, even though they're throwing the ball a crazy amount for the Chargers. Give me some Tetairoa McMillan. Someone traded Emeka Egbuka straight up for Tetairoa McMillan. That's probably 50-50 for me at this point. I mean, Emeka Egbuka continues to just absolutely dominate on a fantasy points per game level. Will people figure that out? Will people figure him out? He seems to be the real deal right now as a rookie, but I do believe Tetairoa McMillan has similar level upside. Love that trade. Someone traded away Travis Etienne, maybe selling high on a Travis Etienne to go get a guy like a Tetairoa McMillan. like that trade as well. So if you want a guy like a Tetairoa McMillan, that's going to be the level of asset that you have to give up. But especially if Tetairoa McMillan is going to be sliding in as your wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, and maybe you got a ton of depth at running back, and you're able to kind of, or even pair up another wide receiver and tier up to go get a Tetairoa McMillan, that's something that I want to do heading into week 4 fantasy football. Now, my next player that I'm actively trying to target, it is going to be TreVeyon Henderson for the New England Patriots. And if you saw the big breakout games this week for Quinshon Judkins and Marion Hampton, rookie level running backs, I think we're looking at TreVeyon Henderson eventually emerging. Now, somehow last week in week 2, TreVeyon Henderson ended up in the doghouse for Mike Vrabel with some missing pass blocking assignments. But in this week 3 game, we saw Ramondre Stevenson put the ball on the ground twice. We then saw Antonio Gibson. So instead of throwing TreVeyon Henderson out there, they threw good old Antonio Gibson out there, who then put the ball on the ground himself. So TreVeyon Henderson only had 34 snaps. Like we said, Ramondre had 27, 19 for Antonio Gibson. So TreVeyon Henderson had the most snaps, had the most routes run, had the most carries. Now, the part that's really exciting for TreVeyon is after all this happened, then he essentially ran 84% of snaps. He had 90% of attempts, 71% of routes, and 5.7 fantasy points after that Ramondre Stevenson 2 fumbles and Antonio Gibson fumble. So all of a sudden, the work all of a sudden slid over to TreVeyon Henderson. Now, thanks to Dwayne McFarland for that tweet. But the part that I do want to hit on is if you want a guy that could potentially be this top 12, top 14 level running back, especially as we saw some injuries this last week, definitely be going and try to trade for TreVeyon Henderson because he's not going to be as expensive as a Marion Hampton, as a Quinshon Judkins. But if you can get in now before things really start to heat up with him, that's what I want to do. Let's go look at some trades over here on the trade calculator. We got someone trading away Travis Etienne for TreVeyon Henderson, Nick Chubb. I think going forward, that would be a trade that I would be interested in. We got someone trading away Trey Benson straight up for TreVeyon Henderson. Listen, I love some Trey Benson. He's going to be the clear one for the Arizona Cardinals. But I think TreVeyon Henderson's a little bit more explosive, so give me TreVeyon Henderson. Someone traded away R.J. Harvey for TreVeyon Henderson, trading kind of 2 underperforming rookie-level running backs for each other. I love some TreVeyon Henderson there. Someone traded Isaiah Pacheco. This is literally after the Sunday night game for TreVeyon Henderson. Ladies and gentlemen, Isaiah Pacheco is absolute dust. So if I can go get a TreVeyon Henderson for an Isaiah Pacheco, I absolutely love it. Now we're moving on to some waiver wire targets for Week 4 fantasy football, and we're going to start it off with Luther Burden because I'll be honest, Trey Benson and Cam Scadaboo should both be owned in a majority of leagues. If they're not, 100% go get them with the major injuries that have happened, to James Conner, to Najee Harris, and to Tyrone Tracy this week. But if we're looking at Luther Burden, 19.8 fantasy points, he had 3 targets for 3 receptions for 101 yards and a total touchdown. Now, the part about Luther is this is a highly competitive offense with the weapons we have. We have DJ Moore, Rome Odunze. We've seen the breakout for Rome Odunze. You got Zacchaeus, who's actually been starting above Luther Burden, which is actually crazy to me. You then have Colson Loveland and Cole Kmet. But the part that's really exciting for Luther Burden is the fact that in week 1, he had 1 target, 2 targets in week 2, 3 targets in week 3. So what? For week 4, he should have 4 targets. Week 5, he should have, they're on bye in week 5. But week 6, they should have 6 targets. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, but I do think Luther Burden, he was a high drafted early 2nd round wide receiver. He's got a ton of explosion. So if I can go get him, right now he's 28% rostered on Sleeper. So if I can go add a Luther Burden, especially if he needs some help with all these injuries, I understand it might be a boom bust flex play, 100%. But Luther Burden was a guy that if you actually were to look at him coming out back like in 2023, you would have been looking at Luther Burden almost as the wide receiver 1 of this rookie level class. Now, in his junior season for Missouri, things did not go quite his way. He did not have the same prolific sophomore season that he had. And so a lot of people were a little bit more down on him. People had the Tetairoa McMillan, Travis Hunter, Emeka Ibuka, Matthew Golden all ahead of Luther Burden. But I think if you were to look at Luther Burden as a prospect coming into college, he's a 5-star athlete. Absolutely love everything that there is to have with Luther Burden. Add him with Ben Johnson, who's a creative play genius. I do think Luther Burden could have a ton of fantasy football value heading down the line. But definitely he is kind of my first waiver wire player. And I'll be honest, this week, the waiver wire is a little bit worse than it has been in previous weeks. We're still not getting a ton of running back help because I feel like a lot of people have all of their running backs already added. So I would be trying to add Luther Burden. My second player that I would try to be add off the waiver wire, and this guy, we talked about him last week. It's going to be Elic Ayomanor for the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to have to learn how to say his name better, but dude is like the wide receiver 1 right now for the Tennessee Titans. And in week 3, had a great game versus the Colts. had 5 targets for 4 receptions, 38 yards, and a total touchdown. So we're talking about this guy continuing off of what he did very strongly last week, where last week he had 15.6 fantasy points in that week 2 game versus the Rams, 6 targets, 4 receptions for a touchdown. So I'm not saying Calvin Ridley's not the one, but I'm also not saying Calvin Ridley is the one. And this guy is right now rostered. He's been getting picked up a ton this morning. So depending on when your waivers run on Tuesday or Wednesday, but he is about 47% roster. So he's about in 1 out of every 2 leagues. Definitely want to make sure you get this guy on the end of your bench because he's absolutely showing out with Cam Ward and with this offense that's definitely struggling. They need some wide receiver help majorly. So definitely go add a good old Elic and Ayomanor on your fantasy football team. But like I said, if you guys want help answering your start sit questions, make sure you hit that like button, ask us a question down below. Helps us out so much, and we want to help you guys. So there's going to be a ton more content this week. There's going to be a stream on Wednesday night. We are going to help you guys win your week 4 matchup. So I appreciate you guys for all the love and support, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.